The following is an excerpt from the book Experiences of Thought by Anthony Kahn, available now on Amazon.com and Kindle. Outside the box, a ghost in the machine. Can a watch tell the time? Its cogs turn and the hands on its face rotate accordingly. But does it perceive time? Is a computer smart? It can perform numerical calculations much faster than we can and store vast quantities of information. But does it know what it is doing? What constitutes a book? Thousands of inky characters populate its numerous pages, but does the story they convey exist in any real sense whilst not taking form in the reader's head? There is a very sharp distinction between the perceiver and the perceived. The letters APPLE are not the same thing as the apple that you can see, touch, smell, and taste. Indeed, the letters themselves and their very shapes are not the same thing as the ink that they are made up of. We need to be very careful that we do not conflate representations of a thing with the thing itself. It is not always easy, as we have been trained to do it from birth. And the more that a symbol is an embodiment of the thing that it represents, the harder it becomes. And so it is with the human body. Who are you? What are you? Both of these questions are surely answered by the biological machine that you see before you when you stare into the mirror. But is that mass of flesh truly the essence of you? How do all those atoms that come together to form your body equate to the thinking and feeling you? Right back at the beginning of Chapter 1, we hypothetically hooked your brain up to an EEG machine and examined the electrical activity occurring in its various regions. We noted that there were correlations between the activity lighting up in various parts of the brain and various processes associated with consciousness. This sounds kind of like a computer, does it not? Electrical signals begin to fire up in the various components as a particular task is executed and information is eventually outputted to the screen. So perhaps our brain, and hence consciousness itself, arises in the same manner that a computer processes information. Neurons communicate with each other via electrical impulses but we end up hitting that hard problem of consciousness. The missing link between firing neurons and the phenomenon of having an experience is so large as to encompass an entire universe within its cavernous void. Clearly, there are important connections between the processes of the brain and our conscious mind, but there is absolutely nothing that can lead us to the conclusion that the brain produces the conscious mind. Since the brain is so often envisaged as a biological computer, let us take a moment to consider how a computer actually does what it does. A computer is no magical black box, but rather a system that behaves entirely in accordance with predetermined mechanical processes. It is made up of a complex assortment of electronic circuitry that is designed to take signals in some human-ordained form, perform some operation on them, and then output the result in a form that we can easily interpret. At its heart, there will be a CPU, the central processing unit, that performs calculations with tremendous speed, based on information stored in memory. The information stored in memory will have ultimately come from some input device, be it the keyboard, camera, microphone, or any other number of devices that act as transducers, converting various physical phenomena into electrical signals. The basic unit of information that all computers deal with is the binary digit, usually referred to simply as a bit, which takes a value of either 1 or 0. The bit can be stored in a number of ways, but its binarity comes from the ease with which on and off states can be transported, stored, and processed within logic circuits such as the microprocessor or CPU. So to summarize, a computer takes information from the outside world, converts it into machine-readable bits for storage and processing, and then converts the result back out of binary form into something either visual, such as the pixels that form words or images on a screen, or audible, such as vibrations from attached speakers. There is no thinking or perception necessary, only a carefully choreographed domino chain that began in the mind of the programmer. So, a computer can emulate us in many ways, and indeed its functioning at some level does in fact resemble that of the brain to an external observer. We can hardly be anything else. A modern digital camera, a computer in its own right, is thus an excellent analogy for a mechanical representation of the material mind. It can see. It has a lens to imitate the cornea and lens within our own eyes, as well as a CCD or CMOS chip within its focal plane akin to our retina. It can hear. It has a microphone with a diaphragm that vibrates in resonance with sound waves from its environment and converts them to electrical signals, just like our ears. It has a microprocessor that receives and processes the inputs from its senses of sight and hearing, and memory in which to store the result, just like our brain. So it must be conscious then, right? It can sense and react to inputs and process the information from them. That's what we do. But who seriously believes their digital camera is a conscious being? Do you really think that it has any awareness of the sights and sounds that it records? Do you think a robot of the kind depicted in your average sci-fi film or cartoon really sees a pixelated representation of the world around them? There is nothing within the functioning of a robot to facilitate this perception of an image. The image matrix can be acted upon by a suite of sophisticated algorithms, but nothing is ever seen. Now, this is not to suggest that there is no possibility of there being some quality of consciousness attached to a camera or, equivalently, to a robot in ways that we do not fully understand. Panpsychism, the idea that consciousness may be an inherent part of all things, even those things classically regarded as inanimate, is quite reasonable within the bounds of what we know. Indeed, it is perhaps the simplest way that we can reconcile materialism with consciousness. But if you are going to attribute consciousness to the brain, you should probably by the same token assign it also to your digital camera and ultimately every object that exists. If in fact consciousness were to arise somehow from the stuff of which we are made, as some as yet unknown property of matter, for instance, one question that arises is that of identity. Why are we single entities? If we are the sum of countless combinations of particles, why is there just one us? Should not every subset of us and every combination of every subset of us be a being in its own right? If we consider the entirety of our body minus a few hundred cells, what form does that subset of us take? This is not an insurmountable obstacle, but it is an issue that must be addressed nonetheless. Panpsychism or otherwise, there is necessarily more to consciousness than just complexity in information transport and processing. A machine is the sum of mechanical processes, nothing more, nothing less. It may look human, it may act human, but it will never be human. Philosophers are prone to speak of such entities as P-zombies, that is to say, philosophical zombies, to illustrate the stark differences between merely having a capacity to act and react, as opposed to possessing the ability to think and feel. These frightening-sounding creatures are not the animated carcasses of rotting flesh that one might find in a horror movie, but instead look exactly like us and act like us in every way, but they are not conscious. In accordance with the easy problem of consciousness, a robot could in theory be made that is so advanced as to be completely indistinguishable from human beings in every way. It would engage in conversation with us, recount its own history, and even describe its experiences with us. It could touch a hot surface, determine that it is hot, and yank its hand away whilst exclaiming, "Ouch!" It could read, using some form of optical character recognition perhaps, and store the information in its memory, and then use sophisticated pattern recognition algorithms to draw on the contents of its memory to respond to our questions or write its thoughts down on paper. It could even debate the nature of consciousness with us. But it would only ever be a robot, devoid of perception and that intangible quality of qualia. You see, there is a difference between you and I and the P-zombie, for it is just a biological machine, bereft of any soul, whereas there is a ghost in our machine, something separate and remarkable.